Rosa. He's also our partner and works in the legal advice service. Paulina Ramirez from Clínica Legal and Luis Sanchez from the legal advice service of COGAM. So Richard, whenever you want, you can start if you like. I'm afraid. Lo siento, pero no oigo, no oímos. Sí, ahora. So Richard is going to do an introduction, and then we will continue with the work organized by our partners, Ricardo, Paulina, and Luis. Richard, whenever you like.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. So I was in Denver in June 1983 when 11 gay men who were among the earliest diagnosed with AIDS. I had pre-AIDS, I didn't have full-blown AIDS. Came together at a conference to talk about the experience, the harrowing experience of being among the first people diagnosed with the disease. In May 1983, the month before, that was the first time that the American media really woke up to the epidemic. And most of what they reported was terrifying and hysterical and over-the-top fear-mongering. People were afraid of the issue of contagion beyond any rational reason to be. And the consequences of the media, of AIDS exploding as a national issue, was the worst consequences of the media reporting on AIDS was borne by the earliest people diagnosed with the disease, especially if you looked like you were really sick. I mean, most of the gay men with AIDS who came together in Denver and ended up producing the Denver Principles were in their late 20s, mid-20s, all the way to about 40. Some were bald from chemotherapy, some looked really sick. And if you also came off as gay, people were terrified to be in the same room with you. And that also included gay men, the LGBT community, because gay men were disproportionately represented by the earliest cases of AIDS. Many gay men were terrified of the possibility of getting sick themselves. And since so little was known, a lot of gay men who were early diagnosed found themselves kicked out of their apartments, unable to contact longtime friends, rejected by their families, treated terribly by the hospitals. I mean, it was just a time of great fear and panic. So when we came together in Denver, 11 gay men from around the country, sharing our stories, sharing our experiences was an incredibly bonding moment. And even though we had differences, the fact that we were all struggling with the same intense experience, and the fact that we felt, because of our illness, that we couldn't even rely on our own community, made us feel an even more incredible bond, that we only had each other, that something about this experience can only be articulated by those of us with it. So during the conference, we ended up deciding to explain it was a gay community health conference, a national gay health conference. We decided to write something that would explain to the conference what our concerns were, what it was like living with the disease, how we felt rejected by the medical establishment, how we felt rejected by our own community. And it was the beginning of AIDS activism. But it was a different type of activism, because activism as we had known it before AIDS was LGBT community activism. And suddenly AIDS pulled us out of the community and made us feel as isolated by our own community as we had felt by the straight world before we came out. And so instead of writing something angry or going up to the stage at the end of the conference and being angry, we decided to take control, and instead of handing out a paper, to each one of us read an important point of the Denver Principles one by one. And that moment was very humanizing, because we not only explained to people what it was like to have the disease, but what they could do constructively to fight it, to help us to understand. And we gave them constructive things that each one of them could do to help out. And I think people were really hungry and looking for that. At the end of our presentation, as each one of us read one of the principles, when we were done, it became a very memorable moment in AIDS history because the entire conference stood up and gave us a standing ovation for like 10, 15 minutes. People were crying. And it really was a seminal moment in the history of AIDS activism. The ideas that we came up with went on to change the world. You know, we talked about how as gay men and lesbians and feminism certainly, the medical establishment had never been kind or supportive of poor people, disenfranchised people, immigrants, queers, black people, people of color, and that knowing that about our history forced us to play a much more active role in dealing with AIDS because we were suddenly being pulled back to the same medical establishment that had rendered us sick, psychologically sick for decades and caused tremendous suffering to gay men. So in our demands that we play an active role in our own healthcare decisions, in our demand that doctors recognize their own homophobia and understand that because so little was known, that they needed to listen to us about our own experiences and to give us the power to make our own choices in what we wanted, what medical treatments we wanted, how we wanted to be treated, what we wanted to do, that they needed to respect our opinion and consider them as valid as their own. Not that we were medical experts, but because so little was known, there were no experts. You know, and each person had the right to determine what they wanted their journey with AIDS to be. And that was very different from the kind of paternalistic, patriarchal, long history of the medical establishment. So I would say that one of the most important legacies of the Denver Principles was that 30 years later, a lot more people than otherwise would have, you know, demand that their doctors listen to them. A lot more doctors are now more sensitive to not just treating patients for the thing, the illness, whatever symptom brought them into the office, but to understand that people are complex, complicated beings, and that you really have to understand a person's entire life to help them out in any kind of medical situation. So I think doctors have become much more sensitive to listening to their patients and to giving them choices to make, because before AIDS, it was very common for doctors to just tell people what to do, and you were supposed to take your orders and follow whatever their doctor said. And certainly a lot of gay men bought into that model of doctor-patient relationship. We turned that on its head. And I think the fruits of that is that today people are much more engaged and much more active in their own health care. The other important thing was that whenever a new disease or an outbreak or a health situation comes along, that the medical establishment and people in general really need to listen to the experience of people being affected by that health crisis or that health whatever, because people who have first-hand experience with it often have valuable information to share and can also help others who are going to later be affected by any kind of health crisis or who are already experiencing it, and that we needed to be included in any kind of government or community response to fight any kind of health crisis. People experiencing the disease have first-hand experience that needs to be respected, which is also one of the tenets of the feminist movement of the 60s and 70s. So with that little introduction, I will pass the torch on to someone else.
Gracias, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Are you going to start, Luis? Okay, so Luis is going to start with the introduction. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The declaration is structured in an introduction, okay, which is a generic introduction. Then we speak about the people who live with HIV. Then we talk about the obligations of the people who live with HIV, the duties, sorry. So we need to, this is being a debate, and so we have to specify some details. So if you have read it, I'm sure you will have things to say. So we're going to talk also about recommendations and the duties of the public powers. So there's a clear philosophy in the document, which is that to be positive, seropositive, implies is that you have a virus within your body, your system, and that causes that you have the need to some health treatments. And what our intention is that everybody who is HIV positive have access to all the necessary health treatments, and therefore that your life expectancy will be the one that is nowadays is offered sciences with all these advances that we know is almost the same as somebody who is not positive. So they need, on the one hand, of a specialized medical care, and of course that has to, the main thing is that people have right to health is a basic right, and the dignity, as well as the consequences that have being HIV positive, and that we normally translate, as we know, all the activists into a situation detrimental, even from the legal point of view. We know that some people are vetoed in our country because they are HIV positive without a scientific base. On the one hand, on the one hand the treatment, and on the other hand, the full development of your personalities. And that implies a series of rights and duties. And so the public powers are the ones who are responsible for developing transversal policies to enable us to achieve the final objective of being people free and equal. Because evidently, being HIV positive, when we see daily the discrimination that we still experience, because we are one of the minority groups with the worst reality of all the social groups, the public powers need to move to do something about the reasons for these being like this, from education to transversal campaigns, eliminating all the different legal barriers, sociological and social barriers that may be. So, as I said, there is a generic introduction, legal rights, and all the questions, all the issues related to this, that we need to have a full realization, achievement of life satisfaction, as well as our rights and duties. From a transversal point of view, as I said, and active, the public powers can continue to be like this. It's vital because, as I said, there are still legal barriers in hospitals, for example, not only in Spain, but in many other countries. So my colleagues will talk about the rest of the points, and evidently we are open to your comments. Thank you very much, Paulina. Would you like to continue? Yes, I just want to add to what Luis added, that the Madrid Declaration 2017 wants to emphasize an answer to HIV based on human rights, including HIV positive people, so that they can exercise the rights in equal terms to any other person. Now, Ricardo is going to start reading the rights. Whenever you like, you can contribute, make a contribution, or say whatever you prefer, whatever you like. So I'm going to read what is the group of rights of the people living with HIV. First, all the people with HIV have the right to dignity and personal realization without them being experiencing any social or institutional barriers formed by negative attitudes based on prejudice, fear, and ignorance. All the people with HIV have the right to not being criminalized. Therefore, the competent authorities have to promote the immediate suppression of all the legal and political policies that pursue people with HIV. All people with HIV have the right to equal opportunities, to no discrimination, direct or indirect or by association, for being HIV positive, and equal opportunities, not being exposed to any discrimination, including distinction, exclusion, or restriction that has the purpose of the effect of obstaculizing, of living without the effect of acknowledgement or exercise of their rights in the same conditions as the people without HIV. Also, we understand that equal opportunities involves the adoption of measures of positive action. Fourth, all the people with HIV have the right to enjoy their sexual life, emotional life as full and satisfactory as that of any other person. Especially women with HIV have the right of to access the assisted reproduction techniques. Fifth, all the people with HIV have the right to receive medical treatment and social services that provide all the guarantees to sustainability of all their needs without suffering any type of discrimination, including their sexual orientation, sex, or HIV diagnosis, economical status, race, or national origin. Sixth, all the people have the right with HIV to receive in an adequate format to their needs in a way that is accessible and understandable, and if necessary, including any other pertinent support, they can choose or reject the treatments. They can refuse to participate in a clinical trial or research, and put their lives, put their treatment at risk. Seventh, all the people with HIV positive have the right to form a family and to be able to participate in all the procedures of adoption, shelter, and tutoring of minors without the fact that they are positive being a reason affecting their equal opportunities. Eighth, all the people with HIV negative have the right to be guaranteed the confidentiality of all the data related to their lives and to their condition, without that being the object or victims of illegal actions. 9, all the people with HIV being HIV negative, positive, they have the right to be informed, particularly about the testing of for HIV in medical test, and that the result of this test may be causing discrimination or limitations in their lives. All the people with HIV have the right to choose their profession and to access the work market, public and private, in the same in equal conditions. And they have to be valued according to their merits and abilities. All the people with HIV have the right to private services contracts, such as health insurance and life insurance, and access and permanence in public establishments and private, and the enjoyment of the services facilitated by these insurances. 12, all the people with HIV have the right to education, quality and free, equal conditions to other people, particularly it is the task of the education administrations to guarantee education to children with HIV in the basic education. 13, all the people with HIV that see their freedom limited and they are sex workers, or they are in any other situation of vulnerability, social vulnerability, have the right to access in the same conditions, protection, promotion, and recovering of their health. And 14th, all the people with HIV have the right to die and live with dignity. I think we all agree with the list of rights that Luis has just read, and what I would like to do now is to read the list of duties. This has been more difficult to draft, so therefore I would like that if anybody who is here wants to contribute to this content that I'm going to read, or has any that whatsoever, you can always contribute with your opinion, because it's something that is being developed. So I'm going to start with the first obligation.
All persons with HIV are entitled to exercise their rights without any antisocial use of the same rights. And in this sense, persons with HIV who have decided to have treatment must make a rational use of the same by trying to keep and achieve good adherence of the same without an undetectable viral load. Number 2, all persons with HIV have the right to exercise their sexuality and the right to reproduction without endangering the person's life or other person's lives by adopting preventive measures against transmission that are necessary and efficient. In case that a possible sexual partner were to ask about the health status, the person with who is HIV positive has the right to answer, as well as the right to not answer about or to inform. In both cases, the person is able to make decisions in an autonomous, free, and conscious way. Sorry, he's not speaking with a microphone. If there's, well, precisely this part of the declaration has generated more debate among us than other parts. Excuse me, please ask for the microphone, because we have streaming going on and translation, and people can't hear the question to translate it. Well, this is what we're looking for with the text, and this will feed fuel to the debate. What's your opinion? I'm sorry, he has no microphone. We're going to do something. First, let's read the document, and then we'll open the debate, and we can pass the microphone around and have different people from the floor speak, because some people have schedules that require them to catch a plane or a train. So let's let Paulina read first, and then we can give our opinion, raise our hands to make comments or ask questions in an orderly fashion. Well, number 2, all persons with HIV have the right to inform about, this is number 3, have the right to inform about their health status to health professionals when they're completing some sort of testing. In the same way, they have the right, it's their obligation to inform about their seropositivity and all situations considered to put transmission by accident at risk. All persons with HIV have the responsibility to make known to the authorities or through administrative mechanisms that are legal and for this purpose of any limitation of their rights, as well as the presence of social, legal, or institutional barriers that impede them the exercise of their rights in equal conditions, and especially when this has to do with the imposition of possible detection of HIV that according to their criteria are not necessary or justified. Number 5, all persons with HIV have the ethical duty to protect the community health, adopting measures of prevention that will impede the development of the HIV epidemic. This responsibility is shared with public powers and the rest of persons within the community, and aims to achieve enjoyment of the right of health protection at the highest possible level. Well, there's one term here that seems a little strange to me. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but this seropositivity, I would talk about serostatus. We're talking about people who we live with HIV and being seropositive. Talking about seropositivity to me seems, I don't like it. This seropositivity, let's talk about our serostatus. Okay, well, we can make a note of that. Well, this is just a proposal. Well, shall we open the floor? Who would like, who has the microphone, or who would mind passing the microphone? Mario? Thank you. Okay, we have the gentleman on the first row, then Mickey. Anyone else? We'll see. Turn it on, Mickey, please. Mario, could you help him with the microphone? No. Now it's working. Well, please state your name. I'm Jose Carlos, and I would automatically erase everything when we talk about duties of people with HIV. I think that's terrible. So you think that people with HIV only have rights, no duties? Well, we've got the same duties as everyone else, but not different. I only have to talk to my physician, and he can tell me what measures I have to do. I know, but there are a lot of people who don't. So people who would say, I'm not HIV positive, and they may say, well, go get tested, and then we'll talk. What's the difference? 30–40% of people don't know they are HIV positive. And I have to have a duty just because I know I am? Well, as a duty, I think this is interesting. I believe it's number 3. There's some cases that have occurred among us where you go to the dentist for cleaning or whatever, and the professional is not wearing a mask or whatever, or glasses. And some of our colleagues have said you should be using this because of your own risk. Someone might have some contagious illness or transmissible illness. So authorities should be using these things. And that way, if you said that, you would be protecting that person. We had a case in Catalonia. Some dentists weren't taking precautions for themselves. And I think that's important. We want to help take care of that person who's a professional, and perhaps it's not that person's fault, it's the company's fault that's not giving the proper tools to that employee. But somehow, I think if you really want to push me, my duty is not to take care of that guy. Well, I don't know if it's a duty or not, but it would be good to say to that person, for your safety, why don't you use this mask? Because maybe they're not applying the right protocols from their company or their guild, and that person is exposed. I think that's common sense. I think it's important. I don't know if it's a duty or not. Well, that's his company's problem. It's not the HIV person's duty. It is not. Let that other person get informed. It's not my duty. I am liable to care for myself, but not to ask other people if they're taking precautions. I'm just there to get my teeth cleaned. Don't ask me to take care of him. We could take care of each other, but I mean, I don't have duties. Don't tell me I've got duties. We could have co-responsibilities. Well, okay, Mickey.
Hola, bueno, yo lo primero...
Well, the first thing is duty, exercise of a right. I'm not going to reproduce myself. It's like we're going to have to go get reproductive aid for to have children and use this. And I think that's kind of crazy. I think it's ridiculous. What you said about having to tell people to take precautions when you were talking about the dentist. It's the dentist's job to protect himself and to use the proper means for protection. I don't have that duty. It's everyone's own job to take precautions. And if I've got syphilis, it's my responsibility to take care of myself. It's my fault for having it because I didn't use a condom to begin with. What are you going to go forward or backwards? That's my opinion. Thank you.
Any other comment? Yes, I think that is a little bit too much. Maybe the term, I know it's a legal term, but duties or obligations, it's kind of difficult in a text to look after yourself, look after another person, look about the common health. I don't know how to do it, but I think it's stigmatizing. For example, in the third point, when you talk about the situation in the point 3, what else is necessary? And the adoption of prevention measures. What are you talking about? Because we've been doing for years working on this, and that point 3, I think, is actually going against all the work that we've had so far, of empowering people with HIV. You know, there are a few points there that they make me feel a bit sick. So in line with what my partners are saying, I can say that, as a whole, I can agree with, but obviously when you talk about them principles, they are really principles. And here we are talking, it's more like a mini constitution. So maybe there is actually, the mistake is the approach. You see, I was actually expecting a declaration, some principles, because I'm talking, when I remember Denver principles, it was just, principles. It wasn't, no, I have this right, that other right. So I was expecting something more along those lines. I also think it's a little strange to talk about rights and duties or obligations. I know that you are lawyers, and so from the legal point of view, maybe for you it sounds okay. For me also it sounds a bit strange. Yeah, there's some things that are also making me cringe. I'm going to give the floor to my partner, but I would like to perhaps later on to have the opinion of Richard, because I think Madrid, I think it sounds more like a constitution. Hello, I'm María Encinas from Salud por Derecho. And for me, I feel the same. It makes me cringe to talk about obligations. It's a dichotomy. One would say that when you talk about rights, you also have to talk about your obligations. But actually, that's not necessary. When we talk about the rights of children, we don't talk about children's obligation. And I think there's a contradiction here, or I haven't understood it. But one of the duties was to maintain the treatment and so on. From my point of view, to include that list of obligations, as citizens, we already have some obligations. So I share this opinion that, perhaps one feels the obligation to talk about obligations. For if Richard wants to give us his opinion. As my female partner has said, we have already spoken about this. If we talk about obligations, it means that they can be part of the legal system. If you don't tell your dentist that you're HIV positive, that doesn't go into the legal sphere. I, as an activist, is not the philosophy that I have pursued over the years. As we have spoken, we have talked about this question. I would prefer to talk about recommendations. We can recommend that, depending on the circumstances of time and place, you can do certain things, or you should do certain things. Recommendations depending on the circumstances, okay, of time and place. And I'm choosing my words carefully. But to talk about duties or obligations, I can't swallow it easily. One in particular, what is it? What is this about, that if you are asked about your state or your status? I don't think, when you're going to have a shag, for example, to put it bluntly, you're not going to talk about philosophy. Well, if you are asked. And so, what about you? What do you have? Do you take pills for the head? I mean, if you're going to take the prevention measures that you may need when you're going to have a shag, this is your thing, your obligation. Yes, you have a moral obligation with the other person, but both of you. So if you take the prevention measures necessary, everything else is redundant. I mean, I don't know what I would answer if I was asked that. We're going to give the floor to Richard, if he wants to say something about this. No, I can't translate because he's not using the microphone. No, I can't hear. No puedo oír. Ahora sí que puedo oír.
I think if you're having unprotected sex and you're HIV positive and there's any chance you might be infectious that, you do have an ethical obligation to apprise your partner. I think if you're having safe sex and with a partner, then it's more of a well, safe sex isn't sort of black and white, but I think if you're having safe sex, it's fine. Actually, I'm not 100% sure about that, because sex is really complicated and things happen. But I do believe in apprising your partner of your status. Even though we know that most people on treatment who are regularly tested to make sure the HIV meds are working are non-infectious, I think it's a complicated area, and I'm not really sure. I'd have to think more about it in this day and age, exactly what to say. As for the dental situation, there was a really tragic situation in the 1980s of a gay dentist who was accused of infecting a young girl, a teenage girl, with HIV while treating her for dental work. The gay community, ACT UP, rallied to the girl's support, demonizing the dentist, assuming that we had all the information we needed to take her side in the belief that because he died of AIDS not long after he had treated her, that he must have given her HIV. She later became the subject of a 60 Minutes national TV report showing that even though she had claimed that she was a virgin and could have only gotten HIV from her dentist, that she'd been treated for sexually transmitted diseases. And so over time it became clear that the girl had lied, that she had a history of behaviors that would explain her having HIV, and there was never any apology to the dentist. That's really sad. One of the intelligent things that we did in America was we recommended universal health precautions, that all health and dental health professionals and dentists, use universal precautions, because HIV is not the only thing that might possibly expose a medical worker to an infectious disease. There are other infectious diseases that pose a risk, and so the way we deal with the issue is just to recommend that healthcare professionals use universal precautions.
Miguel Ángel.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes. Bueno, yo soy
Hello, I am Miguel Ángel Miro, and for those, and the reason why I take part in this debate is because I have part in this text. I have had a contribution. When we talk about the obligations, which is the most complicated part, okay. The first three are already part of the legal system in Spain. What I mean is they're already contemplated. We're not talking about anything new. We are not adding anything. We are not making anything up. They are obligations that they are in the civil code, that you can't be use rights in an antisocial manner, and that, as I said, is part of the civil code, and we have included it here because it's one of the arguments used against the regulation of PrEP in Spain. It's one of the arguments that appear in the official committee in Spain against the use of PrEP. So there is no contradiction, because when we say that a person with HIV can start the treatment, the obligation is for the people who have initiated the treatment. And you have to make a social responsible use of the same. So that argument against why we're going to give them this treatment, PrEP, if they are not going to maintain perseverance, then this argument goes away. And this principle is the harm principle, that you can't harm, or you shouldn't harm a third party. So when we talk about the obligation or the duty to say yes or no. When we are asked, you have the power to inform or to not answer. So we have to be aware that there is a third party, which is an autonomous agent, and we have to treat them as an autonomous agent. So they need to know in what situation they're going to find themselves. So it's just saying, it's a question. We are not saying that you have to declare your status always, independently of whether you are asked or not. But if somebody asks you, which could be your sexual partner, stable or otherwise, if they ask you, what is not ethical is to lie. So you can't legalize lies in a document that is trying to be a declaration of principles. You have the right to not answer. The third, which has also been criticized, is also in the legislation, in the history clinic, in the clinical history. So you have to give true and reliable information. And so there are other questions linked to the no discrimination. But if we want to normalize the situation, we have to be aware that these people have a series of responsibilities and duties. If they don't want to reveal the information, and I don't want to also go into 4 and 5. You see, so that's it, what I wanted to say. Can you give Mickey a mic, please? I just want to point out, and all the risk that you're talking about, you're not bearing in mind. I'm not putting anybody at risk when I go to the dentist. If I don't take the measures. You're also not bearing in mind that there is the obligation of saying it. There should be also the right that the person with HIV is not scared of saying it, because many times it's not that you don't want to say it. You know, some people they don't want to say it because they're going to make a big fuss about it. So the risk, evidently, every person has to control their own risk. To summarize what people are talking in here, I am very sad that there aren't very many more people here attending this, because this is such an interesting topic, and I'm very sad to see very few people in this room. Well, regardless of that, the people who are here giving their opinion, I think the feeling here, in my opinion, is that for example, I wouldn't sign a text. I wouldn't feel comfortable signing it. So there are things, as Ramiro was saying, that are already there and are logical, but some principles, because also you've worked on this, and it's not that I'm disappointed, but perhaps I don't see the spirit that was present in the Denver principles. You see, also is that we already have legislation, right? There are many things that are already appear in the legislation. So why should we do a Madrid declaration? But I think it should have another spirit, more inclined to the community, not so legal. So I would like to hear more opinions. So I'm going to start with the table. So I'm going to give the floor to Luis. Okay. Personally, I think the obligations, no, I've already expressed my opinion. We need to remove the whole thing or just a few generic recommendations. I think when they talk about the public powers, is the fantastically drafted, and the part of the rights is an advancement. Yeah, particularly the rights and obligations of the public powers. Okay, I think we agree on this. Okay. Okay, let's focus this. Okay. The part related to rights, I think there's no objection. Okay, because in this country, this would mean that we would claim and we would, with more persistence, for example, the veto that HIV positive people have to access certain professions and certain sectors in the organizations, in the public organizations. I think it's also including the gender perspective. I think that the part that is arguable, we can see which solution we can give to it. And I think personally I would remove completely directly all the obligations part, because I think the other part means an advancement and is very well drafted, because my female partner here has done it, and it doesn't just include the legal aspects. Thank you, Paulina. I'm gonna give her the floor. I think Ramiro has contributed a lot to this text. Thank you, Ricard.
Well, I agree with Luis. I agree with Luis. I think that the only thing that at this point is a matter of discord is what regards duties. And maybe we should just eliminate that part. It would be more sensible. But I don't see anything wrong with the rights or with the duties of the public powers. So I would just leave the rights and then the public powers obligations or duties as they are, and take out duties of HIV individuals. This part hasn't been well received here, but I think the progress, well, here this is not necessarily progress. It could be a step backwards if we have the duties. But if we can keep the rights of those affected by HIV and the duties of the public powers, I think that would be a step forward. The second part of duties of HIV affected individuals, I think, is a step backwards, however. Well, I don't know, but maybe we shouldn't talk about duties, but talk about principles. I don't know. Let's Paulina and then Richard. Well, as I said earlier, this document that we have drawn up precisely is still in a draft phase. All opinions that you have voiced today will help us to improve the document and will serve to help us change what should be changed. Precisely, I think this forum has given us the chance to express different points of view. I am a purely legal expert, and you have other things that complement the legal aspect part. But I think that a lot of progress has been made since the principles of Denver were issued. So we don't have the same spirit of things today. Things are different, And right now, we have to set some new basis for laws. I agree that the word duties may have a negative connotation. And as our colleague in the audience said, this could be because of our legal customs. Our constitution in Spain establishes rights and duties of citizens. Perhaps the whole section of duties is more a type of criminalization. But it's also true, it's also true that calling them recommendations would leave a lot up in the air. Richard.
I like the idea of recommendations of duties. And I also agree with what this gentleman said. I mean, it is about principles, about disclosure, that in those situations, you have the right, you certainly have the right not to answer, but I don't think we want to encourage people to have the right to lie in terms of any kind of behaviors that put people, that even potentially put people at risk.
Gracias, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Now, let's continue over here. Well, I've got the microphone. I don't want to be repetitive. However, this is still a draft, and we are not going to be those who finally decide about this declaration. I think it's a pity that we are so few people here today to give our opinion about this document. There are things I think that should be changed here. Without even having acquired all these rights, we're being assigned duties, and that's a little difficult. And sometimes the language can give us a little, make us a little fearful. Maybe we could rework the language and talk. Let's get our rights established first, and then we can consider the other part. Anyone else? Kike? Well, as organizer of the event, what I had first envisioned with the Declaration of Madrid was that a draft come out of this, and the people who have participated here in this conference from day one, and we could receive and send out drafts. I would send this out but not include the duties. I would take them out. But it's everyone's decision. Thank you, Kike. Well, to move forward, I would suggest that some of the things we've said here be considered, like taking out the word seropositivity, also taking out the duties. Anything else? I'll pass the word over to our colleague. First of all, excuse my ignorance because I don't have HIV. I don't live with anyone who does. I don't understand the duties or recommendations. I understand we're talking about a group that is suffering from discrimination. And this is, we need a positive activity or positive discrimination to make our rights equal. That's how I see it. I don't think I'm going to have, you're going to gain more rights that are higher than people's who don't have HIV. If you have HIV and you have a child, you have the same obligation to care for your child. But recommendations, I think, is, I'm sorry, I just don't understand that part. Well, let's find a consensus about our draft. We're going to bring this text out, that in this modified text can be later modified. But for now, let's take out duties and the word seropositive and seropositivity. Well, I'm sorry, they're not using a microphone in the audience. Paulina, would you like to read the rest? I can continue. The last part, I think it's well written. It is an improvement, and it is a revindication for those of us who are working against discrimination and stigma every day. All of us agree that we have, that the public powers have duties, and I think this is something we'll see. We may need to modify something, but it's quite good as it is. So the public powers will protect especially the rights of persons with HIV in health, employment, social protection, education, legal custody, information, access to culture, and leisure. Likewise, governments shall protect in a very intense way persons or groups of persons who have HIV and are especially vulnerable to intersectional discrimination or multiple discrimination, such as girls, boys, and women with HIV, older persons with HIV, persons who are incarcerated and have HIV, women who are HIV positive and suffer gender violence. And secondly, in order to guarantee the right of opportunities to persons with HIV, public powers shall establish measures against discrimination and measures for positive action. Measures against discrimination may consist in the prohibition of discriminatory conduct and bullying, requirements of accessibility, requirements to eliminate obstacles or barriers, and to make proper adjustments. The adoption of measures for positive action shall be meant to avoid and compensate any disadvantages derived from health conditions destined to accelerate or to achieve equality for persons with HIV and their participation in the scope of political, economic, social, educational, labor, and cultural lives. They may consist in complementary supports and norms, criteria that have more favorable practices. They shall be destined to they shall be the same persons with HIV who are susceptible to HIV shall receive these in order to have a greater if they're the object of greater discrimination. Number 3, public powers shall develop activities for information, campaigns for awareness, formative actions, and as many actions as necessary to promote equality opportunities and non-discrimination in collaboration with representative organizations of persons who have HIV. Public powers shall promote the implementation and maintenance of awareness campaigns within society accessible to all persons, especially within the socio, health, and professional scopes, fostering the recognition and respect of rights and dignity of persons, of individuals with HIV, for the overall group and to collaborate for their full inclusion in social life. 5th, the public powers shall elaborate or develop actions necessary for coordinating public social actions and health actions in an effective and efficient way aimed to help persons who, due to health problems associated with HIV, need simultaneous or successive types of attention that can result in differentiated treatment according to the necessities of each individual. 6, the public powers shall foster the increase of the activity rates and occupational rates of job for person with HIV, improving the quality of employment, dignifying working conditions, combating actively against discrimination. And for this, public administrations who have competence shall foster opportunities of employment and professional promotion within the market, the job market, and promoting necessary supports for the attainment, maintenance, and of jobs. 7, public administrations within the scope of their competencies shall promote and facilitate the development of measures to promote legal protection and also the development of instruments and mechanisms for legal protection in order to carry out a policy of equality of equal opportunities through the adoption of the necessary measures that can avoid or suppress other legislation and practices that are contrary to equal opportunity, and establish measures for avoiding any form of discrimination for any reason of seropositivity of a person with HIV. In this sense, the measures shall be a system of arbitrage with no special formality that shall be binding and executed by both parties or all parties. Complaints made by persons with HIV insofar as equal opportunity non-discrimination will always have rational reasons if there is any sort of crime alleged to, and shall not harm the government protection, the legal protection in each case. Number 8, public powers shall bear in mind the principle of transversality in the development of public policy in HIV matters, so that in actions that do not limit plans, programs, specific actions meant exclusively for these persons, but they will include policies and lines of actions of a general form in any public action where the needs and demands of persons with HIV shall be taken into account. Thank you very much. I think you've done a great job. It's been an amazing amount of work that's been involved. And ultimately, we feel comfortable with these principles that we hope will be the principles of Madrid. I don't know what else. Mario, you had something to say? Okay. Well, I think it's fantastic. Can you hear me? In point 1, could you put that back up, please? When we talk about point 1, this singularizes, let's see, persons who are especially vulnerable to discrimination. I would add immigrants. I would add homosexuals and sex workers. We've heard this morning from the last group, and I think it's necessary to give them special mention. Nothing more. Thank you, Mario, for your contribution for singling out these groups. Well, I'd like to take advantage and say something. I don't know if it's been mentioned, but that we've had our debate, however, but change the word contagious for transmittable. In this case, I think it's the World Health Organization who should do this. We've talked about that over the last days. I think that would really facilitate our work and help remove a lot of stigma from people who have HIV. Thank you. Could you pass the microphone over there? Well, this is a very short thing I want to say, but instead of gender violence, I would talk about machismo violence. Any other comment that you think would be convenient? Richard?
Yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing this, so I'd be quite happy to go home and, you know, go over it and make recommendations that I can email once I'm back home. We had 3 days to absorb and go over the text, and when we finally signed off on it, it wasn't like we still didn't have differences. I mean, we agreed to disagree on some very important issues and to reach a compromise, so it's not like it has to be perfect. But it's in Spanish, it's the first time I'm seeing it, and I'm sure once I go home and digest it, I can make some contributions to it. But I love the end, and I agree with most people, as they said, about taking out the obligations.
Gracias, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. I don't know if there are any more comments. What about this colleague? Let's wait for the microphone. Hi, good afternoon. This text, are you going to send it out by email if we'd like to modify anything? Could we receive it by email? Let's see, I don't know what the organization had considered, but I think it would be interesting, since there are very few of us here, that we send this text out maybe through, say, SIDA or another organization. Send it out as a draft. I don't know. It's been drawn up for this conference, but perhaps we could hang it from the cloud somewhere, or if there are people who would like to study it. I think it's very interesting, and more people should certainly be involved and participate. And I thank Richard for his interest from his community. I think he can get help for us in this, and we can sit down and study it at length and feel more comfortable about it, like they did in Denver. Well, aside from the web page on AIDS in COGAM, we could send it elsewhere and to European sites and really publicize our agreements and ask for amendments even. Okay, Kike, so let's agree. Paulina, Luis, Ricardo, Richard, somehow we have agreed on this. We've taken out the duties and seropositivity. We've added what Mario suggested, and you also about the... Yes, we've taken note of all of that. So we will modify the document in that way, and then we have also taken note of the audience's interest. I don't know if something else is here we should add. Well, yes, I like Luis. There's something that's really caught my attention, and I think we should have to really go on. And you've talked about people who live in rural areas. We almost always forget them. You could be Romanian, you could be a lot of things, but if you're rural, it's even worse. So I would give those people a greater protagonism. You can be gay, transsexual, have HIV, be an immigrant, and live in a small town, all of those things. So are we clear? Okay, Kike, it's your turn now. I think we're coming to agreement, and we feel more or less all comfortable. Kike? Well, something politically correct. Persons with HIV, I would say persons with HIV or AIDS, and that would be more inclusive. What do you think? More generic, HIV slash AIDS. Yeah. And because that would include the word AIDS in the draft, in the text. Yes, because this is a world declaration. In Europe, I know we live in a bubble, but there are other parts of the world where AIDS is still a daily reality, so it's important to include that word. What I think is interesting, and Kike mentioned this too, we have drawn up the Madrid principles, or whatever you want to call them, and we've agreed that they are these, but obviously they can be improved upon. So leaving here with that declaration that we feel comfortable with, happy with, is saying we've come out with a declaration. The aim, and certainly for the organization, is to come out with this document we've worked hard on and we feel comfortable with, and from here on out, that document more or less satisfies us, but it can be modified, but at least something has been decided and come out of our work here at this conference. So I think it would be very good to package it up in PDF or whatever and then ask for suggestions. What do you think? So, if you have, do you have anything else to add, any of you here at the table or our colleagues? Well, I would like to thank you for all your comments and suggestions, and we will certainly consider them for the draft. I would also like to say something. We're celebrating World Pride in Madrid, this big manifestation or demonstration we're going to have. Without people, seropositive people of my association, this would not have been possible. Many of them are not here with us, and this, I want to remember those that weren't able to join us.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to especially thank Kike because you have really worked hard. Thank you. We're very happy and proud of your efforts. They've been wonderful, and I'd like to thank Jesus and all our colleagues at Kogan and everyone else. I think great. This has been a lot of wonderful work. Yes, everyone. Rocio, of course, as well. She's called all of us, and I think the work has been wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else to say, I think we can conclude. Kike, should we close? Do you want to say a few words? Come on, it's your turn. Well, thank all of you for coming. Without your insistence, this would not have been possible. We have not had the audience we would have liked, but it's been fun. It's been good. We've had a good quality of speakers, people from many different areas, and Luis, you're just a classic. Well, let's give a big applause to Kike and Kogan. Thank you very much, and see you soon.